Sean's talking about an event that ended up being a classic case of entrepreneurial philanthropy. I wanted to, having a slight ego, I wanted to celebrate my birthday in big style. And I went to my 50th birthday, and I went to, discovered actually in conversation that there ultimately was close to 20 oil company presidents who were all born in 1957 in Calgary. And I ended up collecting 13 of them to do a joint birthday party. But it started with me turning to Keith MacPhail and saying, Keith, you and I should do a big party and be a big fundraiser and a blowout kind of party. And he said, what do you think it's going to cost? And I said, well, if each of us are in for $250,000, that'll cover the party, and then we'll see what we can raise. And he said, I'm in. That was the length of conversation. Anyway, that evolved to the point where I was charging people to come into their own birthday party. Anywhere between $50,000 and $100,000 is what we charged. And for that, you got a couple hundred, it depended on how many tickets you bought. So we treated everybody as equal, kind of remembering my daughter's perspective. And we raised $750,000 from 13 guys. So some were at 100, some were at 50, some were at 25. And all that impacted was the number of tickets you got to bring. We ended up having 1,600 people using my model, which is you get a free party, but we ask for a check. And right in the invitation, we said, meaningful charity checks will be expected. Now, this wasn't the first time I've run events like this, but it was the largest scale one that we'd ever done. 13 of us on stage. The charity choice, I'm a prostate cancer survivor, and so prostate cancer was my choice, and everyone bought into that. And we ended up seeking sponsorship dollars from people who were attending the party, which was, in other words, just charity checks as well. So as I walked into the party, I had about $2.25 million in guaranteed donations. We raised about $750,000 at the door, and we threw just one hell of a big party. That's all it was 13 guys getting together, threw a party, and we raised a net of about $2.25 million for prostate cancer. It was the largest, the $3 million gross was the largest fundraiser ever done in Calgary, one-night fundraiser ever done, and it was just, I mean, it was simple because it all fit together, and I booked a venue for 5,000 people for my 55th. Which is coming up in 3 years, so I'll start worrying about that in a couple of years. But that's the sort of thing that excites me, interests me, and last story I'll tell about that party, only because the girl, I met with her this weekend in Los Angeles. But while I was on stage, we had one of the things that happened in the community, there's lots of stories about this event, but one of the things that happened in the community was word started to get out that Brett was expecting $1,000 a person as a donation to come to the party. And I was very clear that we didn't have an expectation. We just wrote the word meaningful. So everyone's asking, what's meaningful? So on stage, I had the guy who was emceeing the event ask me the question, what is meaningful, Brett? When we're talking about charity. I said, meaningful is in the eye of the beholder. It's entirely up to you what you think is meaningful. We encourage people to think about what's the value of the evening that you're participating in. Maybe that's meaningful. Maybe the cause has some meaning to you because you lost a relative to prostate cancer. That's meaningful. Maybe you've never given to prostate cancer, but you've given to breast cancer, which is a cause that has similar incidence of mortality and occurrence. Maybe that'll impact your views of what's meaningful. And I said, so that's meaningful to you. To make it meaningful to me, just double whatever you were thinking of. That comment, one of my birthday guys wrote me a check later that night for $50,000. He was in at 50, he gave me another 50. It just resonated. So that was touching. But the moment that got me the most was when one of my daughter's friends came up to me later that night, and she'd given $20 at the door, and she gave me another 20. And that just hit me. And I'm just thinking of her because I saw her this weekend in LA. She's doing grad studies in music. But when you start to impact people at every level, you know you're making a difference. It's a good question. And I've learned over time that the business model has to be solid, but the person has to be incredibly solid. So I spend all my time, especially on Dragon's Den, trying to get to know the person. When you see Dragon's Den edited, sometimes a pitch that lasts an hour goes down to 4 or 5 minutes. So I call that contrived reality or fake reality, because you're not seeing the depth of questions and the depth of debate. But where I go, I mean, my favorite question to ask an entrepreneur who's pitching a business is, how much time and how much money have you got invested in this? And there's no wrong answer, there's no right answer. I just want to know, because it gives me a sense of what they've got at stake, what kind of passion they bring to the table. Are they lucky sperm and they're taking someone else's idea? And that's okay. I mean, there's lots of great children of great entrepreneurs who've gone on to prove. I mean, I'm invested in a real estate company in Atlantic Canada, in a son of one of the dominant families in that region, but that son wants to prove that he can do it, and he wants to prove so badly. And so the gene pool's strong, but he's not living off his father's legacy. He wants to prove that he is Scott McRae himself. And so I invested in him on that basis. So investing in people is key, because at the end of the day, the business might go away, but you're still stuck with the person. So you got to have a partnership or someone that you want to spend time with. I think overestimating a common theme, and Sean can back me on this, a common failing of the people coming into the den, I'll just use that as an analogy, is they overestimate the market that they're going into, and they overestimate their share of the market. They'll say, look, there's a million dogs in Toronto, and I'm going to sell a dog collar to 1% of the market because I've got the world's best dog collar. Well, there's 7,000 people selling dog collars. If they all had 1%, they'd have a problem. But this belief that 1% should be easy to get for any market, or 0.5% or 0.1%. Again, the question I often ask is, all right, who's your competition? They go, well, I don't know, but we only want 1%. So they fall back on a very weak argument. And so I think it's understanding the size of market and then understanding what you could realistically get. I mean, 1% of the market might be achievable if you had a $5 million marketing budget, but you're selling $10 dog collars. So you're going to spend that kind of money to chase that part of the market. So that seems to be a fairly common. Would that resonate?
I would say it's that and the fact that they don't listen.
Yeah,
people come in and they willfully blind themselves, no matter how much the business team helps them to get a true valuation. Or we give everyone 14 questions that they're likely to be asked in advance. We give everyone copies of books to give them guidance, and they still sometimes don't listen. So you can lead a horse to water, you can put their face in the water, you can even yell at them to drink. But sometimes it takes Kevin O'Leary's harsh word to really get them to do anything.
Yep. The flip side of the point that Sean's driving at is that everybody should be open to learning. But sometimes it's that last phone call or it's that extra push that gets the entrepreneur from average to highly successful. And so sometimes you got to be careful at trying to rain on people's dreams, because and again, it's not about single product like the hula hoops and stuff like that. I'm talking about businesses that might not have occurred or happened if someone hadn't said, you know what, I really believe I can make this happen. And friends and family are going, you know what, you're wasting your time, but they stuck it out. So perseverance has value, but you have to be careful that perseverance doesn't go to the point of maybe stupidity. One of the saddest situations I saw in the den was a couple of elderly women who had sold their, one had mortgaged the house, the other had sold their house to finance a religious game, a board game. And their friends all loved it. Of course, all their friends said, we love it. Okay, well, you got 10 friends, they each bought they each bought a game for $20. You're up $200, you're out 100, 1,000. This didn't work. So it's just, they had bad advice from friends and family, and that really made me sad.